Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Rose City Politics in the year 2022 of the pandemic that just won't quit. We're still doing it live. We're still doing it on Zoom. It's not ideal, but one day I'm going to finally meet my co-panelists in person. I'm really looking forward to it, Doug and Don. I mean, you guys look like nice people. I'm sure that you are. I look forward to being able to, shake hands and maybe share a drink one time.
My legal team will be in touch to give you the rundown on the protocols for approaching me.
And I would like to let Mark Zuckerberg know that we established the metaverse before Facebook did. So we have a patent on this.
Yeah. We've been doing it now for so long. It is January the 5th, though. We are so happy to have you all here. As I said, on the first episode of the new year. Make sure you head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. Support us if you can. We're in BizX Magazine. We're on their website, and we are on all of your favorite social media and podcasting apps. And Rose City Politics has been able to broadcast live on tape every episode, thanks to the kind support of Luna 625, building better communities. We are diving into a series, folks. These are great. Always love it. Gets easier and easier to write these stories because they already exist rather than doing a deep dive into something that's breaking. We are doing a retrospective. We are going through the past files. We are talking about the wards of Windsor. And of course, where do you start out? Ward 1, Councillor Fred Francis. We are going to be doing a deep dive this episode and for the next 9 weeks, I guess.
Wow. Is this like Ward 1, the fighting first, like the old Stephen Colbert first show?
Fighting first. Yeah, exactly. First. We're in it.
Better to know a district. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it was also really like just what a gut punch right there to say, like, for the next 9 weeks, like realizing how much like people who don't operate in the broadcast space or in like the weekly news space really don't have an understanding for how quickly the weeks can go by and how it all blends together in a weird way.
Think positive. By the time this is done, it'll almost be spring.
Well, I mean, or it's a new variant.
Thanks, John.
Well, no one's having fun. We
just
got another
punch us all in the face before the year even starts.
Well, we hope not. We got another 9 weeks of this, though. We are going to dive right in with Ward 1. We are talking, as I said, about Councillor Fred Francis, and we're going to go to Doug Sartori, our resident Ward 1 expert, primarily due to geographical setting and where you live. Doug, you live there. You're in Ward 1.
I definitely do, and I am coming to you from the iconic location in South Windsor in Ward 1, the Arcada Pizza sign. This is,
and if you watch on the video, we'll be posting Doug's address later on the feed, so you can just go visit him in his house if you want.
Don't dox me, Don. This is the one of the highlights of the Ward 1 skyline. I think the Arcada Pizza sign is the tallest building in the ward. Anyway, Ward 1 is the wealthiest ward in Windsor. We are using the statistics and data from Ginger Politics Know Your Ward series. These are data from the 2016 census. Conveniently for us, the 2021 census has not yet been released, so we cannot update this data yet. I believe that will happen somewhere in this cycle of Ward Watch episodes. So at some point, we'll be able to provide you with up-to-date 2021 data. Here we are. Total population of Ward 1, 22,395 people. That's a little higher than average. It has the lowest population density per square kilometer, particularly, I think, because the Pole 1, which is the western half of the ward geographically, extends all the way out to LaSalle, to Ojibwe. It's a really, really big and not very densely populated area. We have 23% of our population under 19 and 22% over 65. Interesting mix in Ward 1. It has one of the highest in both categories. We have a real mix of young families as well as seniors. The median income in Ward 1 is the highest in the city at $35,000 and change. And the after-tax average income is also the highest in the city at $43,818. Ward 1 has the lowest low income rate in the city. It has the highest percentage of the population in the top income decile. It has the lowest rate of transit use, percent of public transit users who use the bus to get to employment, 1.1%. And the top 3 industries of employment in Ward 1, manufacturing, healthcare and social assistance, and educational services, which I think really gives you a good picture of what the folks are like in this ward. It is a wealthier ward. You have a lot of folks who work in management positions, a lot of folks who are teachers, who work in healthcare, who are have a good salary because they are delivering a highly skilled job, or because they're in management. That I think is a pretty good overview of the ward. So that's what we're looking at demographically. And I wanted to get into past elections too. So I went to the City of Windsor website and I looked at all the elections going back to 1991. Some names that will be very familiar to followers of politics in Windsor. Starting in 1991, Dwight Duncan and Margaret Williams were the councillors. For those who are newer to the city or a little bit younger, there was a change in the ward distribution. We went from 5 wards to 10 wards for the 2010 election. So up until 2010, you had 2 councillors elected in Ward 1. Margaret Williams was the top vote getter in the 94 and 97 elections. Dan Allen and Dan Roach took the second spot in 94 and 97 respectively. Charlie Hotham was the councillor in 2000, the top vote getter. Joyce Zuck was the second councillor. Dave Brister was councillor in 2003 and 2006. In 2003, Joyce Zuck repeated, ran and won for her second term. And in 2006, the second vote getter and therefore getting the spot on council was Drew Dilkins. So he was first elected in 2006, came in third in 2003. In 2010, Drew Dilkins won again, pretty handily, defeating Matt Ford. 6,300 votes in 2010 for Drew, and 1,437 votes for Matt. In 2014, Mr. Dilkins went on to run for mayor and win, and Fred Francis ran in Ward 1. You may remember that 2014 Ward 1 race. It was wild. There were so many candidates. Votes were split all over the place, and Fred Francis won in a nail-biter, 2,953 votes to Ryan Mancini's 2,370. Matt Ford tried again, 1,112 votes. And in the last election, 2018, Fred Francis was the winner with 3,507 votes, and Darcy Reno was the second place finisher, 2167. Third place, Matt Ford could only rustle up 428 votes. So that is the demographic and electoral history of Ward 1.
Hey, Doug, thanks for setting the table there on that one. You know, we're gonna, I guess, let's lean into, I guess, before we go into, you know, breaking down some of the, you know, top news stories that have popped up in Ward 1, just overall impressions of where things stand. You know, we've got the data, we got the stats as you just put out, but you know, Doug, I want to go to you again. This is your backyard. Where do you think things stand right now, moving into, you know, election silliness and then the earnest election campaign itself? what is your take on Francis's, ability to be able to get reelected? Do you think that he's going to have to put forward a stronger effort than he has priorly? That's not a word, but we all know what I'm trying to say there. And I guess what might need to be done if someone was looking to overtake specifically?
Fred Francis has an asset that you can't underestimate, which is name recognition, and the magical Francis name, which is a powerful name in Windsor politics. Those are huge assets in his favor. But what I found interesting in looking at those results that we just talked about was how small Mr. Francis's vote growth was between 2014 and 2018. The field was a lot smaller, and to be frank, there were not very many serious candidates running in 2018. This is an environment where Fred Francis should clean up as an incumbent with lots of name recognition, who has been assiduous in catering to his perception of the needs of Ward 1. But he only managed to find about 500 more votes between 2014 and 2018. So compare his 2018 result, 3,507 votes to win, with Drew Dilkins in 2010, who got 6,312. If I were a Fred Francis supporter, if I were in Fred's camp, I would be worried about that number. I would be worried about his limited appeal in the ward. And everything was flowing in his favor in 2018. And he struggled. He got over 50% of the vote. And so on the surface, that's good. But he struggled to put away his challenger, Darcy Reno. Ms. Reno ran a terrific campaign. Full disclosure, I helped that campaign a little bit. I'm a Darcy Reno believer. I think she would be a fantastic counselor. What she was able to achieve as a first-time candidate running against an incumbent with powerful name recognition should not be underestimated. I've got every reason to believe that that Ms. Reno will take another crack at this ward. She certainly has done the things that you need to do between elections as a returning candidate to come back and try to improve your fortunes. She's been active in the community. She's been vocal on municipal issues. She has delegated at council. She has written guest columns in the Windsor Star that have illuminated, I think, some complex issues for folks. And she is well on her way to articulating an alternative vision for Ward 1. One other thing that I want to point out is that when you look at that list of councillors, the 7 men and 3 women who have represented Ward 1 since 1991, there are some patterns that you can detect. And Ward 1 tends to lean conservative, not that surprising given that it is the most populous ward in the city, but it also has a history of electing progressive women. Joyce Zuck, Margaret Williams, these women, I think, point out a path for Darcy Reno for the way that she would want to run her campaign for the folks that she would want to communicate with. So yeah, I think Fred Francis should be scared. If he's not planning to work harder to win in 2022 than he did in 2018, then he could be in for a disappointment on election day.
Especially if she gets a really good campaign team, not the slackers they had last time.
Why you got to be like that, Don?
It's the new year, new me. I'm changing my whole thing over here.
There's nothing changed about this. This is just still same old Don.
No, I'm picking on Doug now instead of you. That's my New Year's resolution.
So. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Don, let's bring your voice in on this. What's your take on Councillor Francis's prospects moving forward?
Well, we all know in politics, what level our name recognition is a huge thing to overcome if you're running against any councillor or any member of parliament or any member of provincial parliament. So, Fred's always going to have that going for him. My own perception, and then look, and then full disclosure again, I did not help Darcy on her campaign. She does not want loser Don from Ward 3's help on her campaign, but I do think she would be a great counselor, like Doug said. I think she'd be a much better alternative than Counselor Francis has been for the last little while. I feel, and this again, just personal perception, I feel that Counselor Francis has kind of been just calling it in this last term. Not much has really gone on. The only thing he really talks about is hold the line on taxes, working for the taxpayers, which we all know is a load of bunk, because as soon as a pet project comes along or a Roseland thing comes along, there's money for everything. So all he's really talked about my perception is Roseland Golf Course is still profitable. We have to put money into that, which is a lie. And yeah, whenever he doesn't, whenever him and the mayor don't want to vote for something like transit, as Doug brought up in the preamble, that transit's not a very high priority in that ward because people don't use it, and I would assume that's an income thing. Most people just don't have to use it, so they don't. So yeah, I think he's vulnerable. But yeah, it's always hard to knock off someone with a name like his who's been there for a couple terms, as your dad and I both know, John. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I would like to see some change over there, and I think that ward deserves something a little better than they're getting right now.
I want to just touch on something that you brought up, Don, and you're right. We don't hear that much from Fred Francis, and when we do, it's very he picks his spots, as you said, and I think that that's strategic. I'm going to be frank here. I don't know that Councillor Francis has a lot of natural assets when it comes to his ability to communicate and his ability to connect with people. He has that name, and that name is a really valuable asset. And you don't want to mess it up by creating new impressions for people who are already perfectly willing to vote for you because they recognize the name and they feel comfortable voting for a Francis. So I think that that's actually a strategy. I don't know if it's fair to say that it's the councillor's work ethic would be the reason why he's a little bit less visible than you would expect from a Ward 1 councillor and a councillor in their second term. I think that it's strategic. But that's not to say that there's a lot of evidence that he has a tremendous work ethic either. I noted in the article you shared that Fred Francis said in announcing his candidacy in 2018 that he eats and sleeps being a city councillor. And I gotta say that just does not ring true to me. I don't see a lot of evidence that Councillor Francis is working hard in the ward or doing a lot more than anyone else around the table on the work of being a councillor. He doesn't sit on all that many committees. He's got a full-time job. If he eats and sleeps being a city councillor, that's kind of a raw deal for his employer, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I'm sure he was just referring to the donuts in the meeting room and the free coffee back there. So
maybe it's the 43-year-old.
Was he part of that whiskey party? Probably.
I would hope that each one of them had an opportunity to be invited.
Well, you would hope so. So I'm gonna, after all these critical things I just said about Fred Francis, I'm going to say something not critical. Councillor Francis did go through, I believe, a cancer scare in the last few years. So obviously his health was a priority. And as much as we are super critical of him and maybe would like a different person to have his job, we are happy that he's healthy and everything is good, because that whole family has had enough people with health issues that have not turned out well. So we do wish him the best. Again, we just talk politics here. We're not trying to attack the person as an individual. I guess kind of what I meant. I mean, we look at the new batch of counselors that came in for the last election. Councillor McKenzie, who, again, full disclosure, was on the show. He was new. Gary Kashak was new. Who else am I missing? Was there anybody else who was new in there?
Dante.
Oh yeah, Fabio, but the guy who got the
Morrison.
A+, who is always on alert that could change. I think Fabio's done a fabulous job. I think he's been out there. He's been really working for the ward. Kieran was working for the ward even before he was there, but he's been out there, going after things. I just feel with Counselor Francis, and maybe it's just because he's been there for a couple terms now and he's just not as excited as a new counselor, just seems to be kind of floating along a little bit. And we've all paid attention to politics, municipal politics, especially for a long time. That happens. It just, you start to coast a little bit because you come out, already excited. You got your new gig, and then after 4 or 5 years of people calling you complaining about their neighbor's cat, it kind of beats the wind out of you. So you might slack off a little bit. But I just, again, my opinion is more like Ward 1, because of its income levels, kind of its population. Looking at the ward itself, there's not a lot of upheaval there. There's not a bunch of new subdivisions going in. There's not a bunch of crazy stuff like that. So it's kind of just an old section that hasn't changed a lot. Your biggest changes and some of the things we've heard that people are complaining about is, around Roseland Golf Course, there's a lot of wealthier people going in there and tearing those houses down and building mega mansions out there. So that's been kind of, put some questions into, the old people who have been living there for a long time don't like that. People don't like change. And that really is how I see that ward, as just a bunch of people who are kind of comfortable, like it the way it is, and don't really want to change. So I think that probably plays into Counselor Francis's hand a little bit too. There's not a lot of new people going there. You're getting more students, so you're probably going to lose some of your actual voting base because students don't vote, because they're transient. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in this election.
Yeah, it will. I think Ward 1 is less diverse socioeconomically than other wards in the city, for sure. I do think there are some distinct communities within Ward 1, or distinct neighborhoods that have different interests and that respond to different political appeals. The areas, and there are 11 polls in Ward 1 if you include the retirement homes. If you include places like Kensington Court, there are 11 polls. And it's, this is the level of granularity that we have for the data. When we look at election results, we are getting results based on polls. When you get the list of electors as a candidate, they are divided into polls. So it's pretty natural to look at those different parts of the ward and evaluate them separately. The southern part of the ward, everything south of Cabana Road, is far more conservative than the parts of the ward that are north of Cabana. So the Roseland area, Southwood Lakes, and the area around Southwood School are far more conservative, and that's where you're going to find the people who are extremely militant, anti-tax increase, not interested in funding transit, et cetera, et cetera. North of Cabana Road, you're going to find a lot more families, a lot more progressive voters, a lot more folks who are union members, whether they are in a public sector union or a member of a trade union like Unifor. So there is a distinct difference between different parts of the ward. But in general terms, I understand what you're saying, and I think that the characterization you're making, Don, really reflects reality south of Cabana, which is where the highest turnout polls are. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And higher turnout areas are more important for candidates and for winning the ward. So, to the extent that that's the pool of the most reliable voters, those folks matter a lot in Ward 1.
You live in the ward, Doug. Let me ask you this question. Since Councillor Francis has been the counselor over there, what kind of quote unquote big investments have gone to the ward? I guess Cabana Road is the most recent one. Was it a world-class road? Is that what the mayor called it? That world-class intersection at Cabana and Dougal?
Yeah, the world-class 4-lane road. Yep, Cabana Road widening would be a big one. The Capri Recreation Center, that would also be a major investment in Ward 1. Those are the two that jump out at me. Roseland Golf Course, if if that renovation to the clubhouse is approved, that would be also a pretty significant municipal investment. Some things that you might not think of. Ward 1 is a suburban ward. Fred Francis pointed out that there is no library in the ward. It's one of 2 wards in the city with no library, Wards 1 and Ward 9. Although Budimir Library is extremely close to the northern border of Ward 1, there is no library here. And I think that is part of the reason why electors in Ward 1 are relatively uninterested in investment by the municipality, relatively uninterested in tax increases. Ward 1 is not a part of the city that relies on city services, except for, I guess, if your streetlights need replacing, that is that's an instance where you're going to turn to the city, because of course, decorative streetlights would be one of the highest municipal responsibilities.
Well, you don't want to have, those hillbilly streetlights we have down here in Ward 3 in your ward. And if I'm not mistaken, most of you rich people in Ward 1 have your own private libraries where you sit by the fireplace in the leather wingback chair and smoke cigars and drink scotch and talk about your hedge funds. And then, so you don't really need a public library out there.
I don't like where this conversation is going at all, Don.
Yeah, because it's going to reveal where these places are.
Yeah, it's called Doug's Basement. It's Doug's Basement. That's where it is, John.
No, I mean, it's really interesting how you bring that up, Doug. The fact that there isn't the reliance, though, on the public services that are provided. Not really sure where to take this right now. We've got a bit of time left, but I think a good one might be to look at what Councillor Francis said that his re-election hopes were for.
Can I say one thing first, though, John?
You can say whatever you want. I'm not in charge.
That's right, because I'm picking on Doug now. So Doug brought it when I asked Doug about the investments. One of them was the Capri Rec Center, which was the old South Windsor Arena for us old timers. Now, when that happened, kind of time frame wise, there was also a lot of complaining about the number of investments being pulled out of some of the lower income neighborhoods, and I was very loud on that on this show. At that time, we were closing, I think, community centers in Ward 2. Some of the schools off, Forester had closed down there. A lot of programs had been cut, and the city was pulling money out of there and putting money into, South Windsor Arena. And, once we get onto the other wards, there'll be many other things that I'm going to refer to this again. So I guess that's just a point I wanted to make, that the investments that they do get sometimes, in my opinion, are at the detriment of the lower income areas. And I think, and I'll go back to not so much the income level, because they can't keep beating on that, but the voter turnout. People in these wards vote. And I think when they want something, especially when it's coming close to, to election time, they're probably going to get it more so than someplace like a Glengarry or, any of those kind of neighborhoods that don't really have high voter turnouts.
I think you raised a really good point, Don. Turnout is so important to winning elections, and having a strategic approach for your campaign that pays more attention to areas where people vote more. It's such an important and basic component of political strategy. And I think you can draw the link between where voters turn out in detail in Windsor and what kind of policies get advanced. Ward 1 and to a lesser extent Ward 6 are absolutely essential for winning the mayor's chair. Each of those wards vote at a clip that is about 5% higher than other wards in the city. And they are the most vote-rich parts of the city. And going back to your comments about transit, 1.1% of people in Ward 1 rely on transit to get to work. You combine that with the fact that voter turnout in Ward 1 is higher, that the folks who are the most engaged members of the community are likely to be on that side of the spectrum where they don't want to see more investment in transit. They want to see more investment in roads, or even better, less investment overall. So It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be insidious. It doesn't have to be evil and calculated. It's simply a situation where your mayor is from Ward 1. Your mayor is the closest to folks in Ward 1, speaks the most to people in Ward 1, lives in Ward 1, relies for his bedrock base of support in Ward 1. The mayor is still far more popular in Ward 1 than the Ward 1 councillor is. He is going to reflect both by self-interest and by his nature. He is going to reflect the preferences of the people who reside in that ward. And it's, I think that it has a tremendous impact. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but generating interest in municipal elections all across the city is, in my mind, is the key to getting policy outcomes that reflect the entire city's needs. If you are the mayor of Windsor, and you've got on one side, you've got the councillors in Ward 1 and Ward 6 telling you that they want option A, and you've got the councillors in Ward 2 and Ward 3 with the lowest turnout in the city telling you that they want option B, where are you going to land? And that comes down to community effort and electors in low turnout wards recognizing how powerful they actually are as individuals.
Let me ask you this question. So this is kind of a specific topic going on in your ward. So over the last few years anyway, and again, I've harped on this for many times, brought this topic up. There's been a huge influx of students over at St. Clair College. A lot of foreign students have come in, and if you've paid attention to the media and, the people ranting out there, is a lot of, what would have been considered subdivision or suburb houses are now turning into student rentals. So you're getting a bigger population of transient students who are moving into these houses. And a lot of, there's been some pushback, and there's being purpose-built housing outside of, the St. Clair College area. People building 6-7 bedroom homes just strictly for students. Do you think, giving your opinion as someone who lives there, but also someone who obviously runs campaign and is part of that secret liberal machine that runs the world, do you think thanks,
we
John.
would win more elections in Windsor if we ran the world, buddy?
Yeah, well, I know. Do you think the people in the ward who vote, which are probably going to be your more established, older residents who've been there for a long time, do you think they're going to be more prone to stick with someone like a Fred Francis, or do you think a more progressive candidate, because there are more students in there? I don't know if they're going to come out and vote, which also, which means there's younger people there. Do you think a more progressive candidate could come in there and beat them just because of demographic change, or is the ward really going to harden itself, and those people who go out and vote for the same people to don't make any change are going to be even more adamant this time around?
So I think that if you're relying on the student vote as a strategy in an election, you're screwed. That the student vote does not pan out. So I would not expect international students to be any different. In fact, I'm not sure that they're eligible to vote in a municipal election. So all of those things would be considered. I want to talk just for a minute about that, though. The changing demographics in Ward 1, particularly the influx of international students, has definitely raised tempers in the ward. It definitely, people are seeing an impact on their neighborhood, whether it is packed buses, or whether it is, yards that are not kept up to standard because they are rental homes with an absentee landlord, and the tenants don't do the maintenance work because that's not their job. All of those things, I think, are in the mix. I don't think that there is any way to really capitalize on that politically, except, and this is what I think is the key. I don't think that you can run in Ward 1 as a straight up progressive person and find success. Where I think you can win in Ward 1 is as a centrist, as a person who shows that they have a respect for taxpayers' money and a respect for the importance of being careful financially with city administration. I think that is a given. But I think that where I think that Councillor Francis is vulnerable is that his message is very simple and basic. His message is designed to be read as a headline or, half heard on the radio as you're driving into work. His message is not meant to engage people and really like people who are really thinking about these issues deeply. And I think that's where there is a vulnerability. And I think that that's where there's an opportunity for a candidate who is more progressive, more interested in being creative, who can also establish solid credentials as a fiscal conservative, which does not have to be a bad thing. Effective money management is not something that is incompatible with moving the city forward. And if you were going to run a campaign like that, the key would be to engage people one-on-one. You would need to expend an awful lot of shoe leather, getting to every door in the ward twice if you can, and having those conversations with people to talk to them about the details of policy that get missed in headlines or get missed in short news pieces. You have to go beyond the sound bites. The good thing about that is that ward campaigns are built for that kind of engagement. Councillor Francis does not campaign that hard. He is not a campaigner who is out there knocking on doors. And I know every successful candidate and every failed candidate will tell you that they knocked on 30,000 more doors than exist in the ward. I look at what I see on the ground in elections in 2014 and elections in 2018. I've been engaged in campaigns in both those years, and you see people, you run into candidates, whether they're running at the municipal level for school board or for council. You see people on the street, you see how they're engaging, you see the way that their literature rolls out. And I just didn't see that from Fred Francis in 14 or 18. I did not see evidence that he made a massive ground effort. So that's where I think the vulnerability is, exactly that. Engage people on the ground with a more authentic, fiscally responsible vision for the ward and the city, and he could be in trouble.
So John, I'll ask you this question since you pay attention to this stuff pretty close. If you guys remember, I don't know if it was I think it was 2 elections ago, we had a whole bunch of kind of candidates that all kind of worked together who put their name in the hat right away, like the first week of January. You see anybody doing that this year? Is there anybody who's been chomping at the bit to get out there and get their message going? And it tends to be the rabble rousers.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. But again, you're talking about some pretty inside baseball observations here for someone to, I think, pick up on this, right? It's not that Councillor Francis has made an outward mistake. It's just that he hasn't been, keeping the gas at, 100.
Yeah, I remember with those candidates, a lot of it was, they had a very contrarian message they wanted to get out, and they had to get out there right away. And like Doug had mentioned, Councillor Francis isn't, a shoe leather kind of guy getting out there knocking on the door. So I'm just wondering, and, Darcy Reno is, a pretty professional candidate. She's know what she's doing. She's been in the political world for a while. I'm just wondering, and maybe not in this word, maybe it's just a general question, if you guys see anybody who's been kind of chomping at the bit for years. Hey, do you think you see any of these PPC candidates running for council?
That's an interesting question. So you're talking about
don't make the noise.
Yeah, you're talking about the Windsor Square slate in
that was the slate that was running.
I think the statute of limitations has expired on not mentioning them. They haven't been a thing for like 5 years.
That's true. We can talk about them again.
So that was I think that was a really interesting one. I would say that the timing of when you file your papers and announce that you're a candidate is something that really matters. And it's going to be different for different candidates are going to see value in different ways of handling that situation. One reason to get in early is that you think you need a longer runway to raise money. That's one reason to get in early. Another reason to get in early is that if you think that your name in the race is going to scare other people out and keep other people out, then that's a good reason to go early. Otherwise, there are a lot of reasons to hang on and wait until people are paying closer attention. There is, you can't underestimate the value of that earned media that you get when you announce your candidacy. And if you do it way early, you're going to get less attention and people are going to pay less attention. If you announce in, I don't know when the deadline is this year, but if you announce closer to the deadline, that is, I think also can be a strategically sound choice. So it's really dependent on a lot of different factors and your particular strategy for your campaign. I don't think that we're going to see a fringe slate like on day one. I don't think that there is that set of people who are so outraged and incensed and lacking in political sense that they're going to go as a clump and declare on January 1st or whenever you can. I guess January 1st is in the past, but I don't think that's going to happen this time. We could be surprised, but I don't see that out there.
So you're saying don't vote clump.
Never vote clump. Don.
Never vote clump. You can have the show back, John. I'm done asking questions.
No, that's funny. It made me laugh. I like that. Well, let's look at, Doug, before we leave the show here. I think we're getting towards a natural exit. Looking towards what Councillor Francis was seeking to achieve for re-election last time around. It's useful to, do the bookends right now for people to be able to frame it. And living in the ward, I want you to just answer honestly, on these things. First was improvements for Talbot and 6 concession.
I have no idea if that happened or not. Sorry. That's
no, I mean, and
it's not my stomping grounds.
That is no, I think that's fair. I think that's completely fair.
Carry on with the list.
Okay. The second was roads and sewer investments. I mean, I don't need to ask you that. We know that our mayor, Drew Dilkins, has emphatically committed ourselves towards roads.
Well,
and
so I don't want to answer for Doug, but as a real estate guy, that was and still is a very big deal for the older section of South Windsor. Your McKay's and all those streets kind of between Grand Mares and Cabana, because they had huge flooding issues when those houses were built. I know some real estate agents who actually sold those houses back in the 1970s, I believe it was. So yeah, I can understand that being a big issue, and I think they've put a lot of infrastructure dollars into resolving those.
Well, and you just touched on the last priority that he brought forward in this Windsor Star article from the last election, which was to find solutions to prevent the flooding that has been seen. And of course, the city has committed a lot of money towards those types of infrastructure improvements. So not to say that, the councillor is responsible for it or anything, but do you think that the check mark on the list there is that a positive? He'll be able to point to it on his campaign lit, Doug?
So I think investment in roads and sewers has happened, and it has happened in a way that not only has it been done, but it's been promoted and publicized and announced and re-announced and re-announced over the years. And I think that you can see the seeds of that in the 2018 piece that you're citing. That 2017 flood was traumatic. It was a galvanizing moment for a lot of people across this city. And I think rightly, municipal government responded not only to do practical things that would improve infrastructure, but also just to make people feel good and feel like that the issue is being addressed. Look, if you're a resident of Windsor and you feel like not enough money has been put into roads and sewers these past 4 years, then you'll never be satisfied. with investment in roads and sewers. So, so yeah, I don't think that Councillor Francis is vulnerable to a charge of he hasn't done enough about flooding.
So this wouldn't be a show unless I insulted everybody in Ward 1. So this is my opportunity. To me, it's funny, the little stories and little situations that come up in any ward, to me, really tell you what the residents kind of how they are, how they think. And for me, I look at, I've kind of said they're older, more established, don't want things to change. And I kind of believe that. And what crystallizes that for me is pushback on putting sidewalks in front of their houses. And there was a big brouhaha about all the kids walking over to Massey High School, how that was very upsetting to people. But they, again, didn't want to put sidewalks on both sides of the streets because they don't want all those little rugrats walking in front of their house. So those two little, the anti-sidewalk people and kids stay off my lawn is really kind of, crystallizes Ward 1 for me.
I think that's a fair point. Ward 1 is a lot of folks who like their 3-car garage, their no sidewalks, their immaculate lawn. That's those stereotypes are not inaccurate. I think there is more diversity than you might think in the ward, but there's no question that it's one of the wealthiest and least dependent on municipal services, and that includes sidewalks. Folks in Ward 1 drive their kids to school, and you don't have to look any further than the daily nightmare at every grade school and high school in the ward. And I realize this happens across the city, but if you look at what happens on the streets every single day at start of school and end of school around Massey High School or around Southwood Public School, and yeah, that's a reality. Like those sidewalks, they wouldn't get used anyway, Don. What are people using their feet for outside?
Well, to walk their labs. They all have golden retrievers and Labradors there. And so,
I love, it's not an inaccurate picture of my neighbors, no question.
No, I work in all these neighborhoods. And so all that, let me say, I've been in real estate for 22 years, and young families who have kids, who school age kids, and even heading towards high school age kids, they all want to be in South Windsor. And that's why housing prices in South Windsor are what they are. It is more of your upwardly mobile, somewhat higher income people all want to go there. A lot of the immigrants who have come over who have money, they all want to be there because of Massey High School, plain and simple. So it's that type of area, and it's very desirable area. So, aside from the, kind of the shots I've taken at them, people love living in that neighborhood, and I can understand why they don't really want it to change too much.
Aside from the shots I've taken at them. Also, donmerrifieldjr.ca for all of your realtor needs.
No, it's first of all, it's donmerrifield.ca if you want to do the joke one that Doug set up, and donmerrifieldjr.com if you want real estate stuff.
I've bought a few other domains. Go check.
I'm sure you have. Yeah. We were talking about Stormy Daniels earlier. I think I can't wait to see what the next one goes to. .net.
Well, we have done it, folks. We have made it to a full hour in 2022. Who would have thought that? We pulled it off without Pat too. Wish that she was here, but we did it. We will be back next week. Today is January 5th, 2022. Support us at Patreon. Get right on it. It's the beginning of the year. We are at patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We are in BizX Magazine and at bizxmagazine.com on all of your favorite social media and podcasting apps. And Rose City Politics has been broadcasting live on tape thanks to the kind support of the UNA 625, Building Better Communities. We will be back next week, I guess, diving into Ward 2. We've got our schedule set up, folks. The next 9 weeks, I hope you're all ready, because we are ready for it as well. We look forward to.
You can't dive into Ward 2 because they took all the public infrastructure out of there. There's no pools, right? Preview for next week's show, people.
It's good. We will leave it at that, folks. It's been so great to spend this time right at the beginning of the year with you. I hope you keep tuning in.